Hey, Mashiro, welcome to Fractional Frontier.
Thank you.
I have a little introduction for you here. You're a fractional CTO and technology advisor, helping startups build their products, processes, and people, especially at funding. That's a big one. With an MVP and the need to build, scale, hire, and grow, and all of that at once. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you
Um,
for having me.
First question for you is you've got some very interesting hobbies, sailing, diving, riding, and this is, I think, riding motorcycles, snow and water skiing, and flying for fun and amusement. Um, I bet you have some fun favorite adventure story that you tell from one of these, and I thought we could start with that.
Yeah, I'm not quite as adventurous or a daredevil as you might think from reading that. And actually, I fly helicopters. It's even more exciting and interesting. But one of the things you learn from doing that, for example, is being actually risk averse or trying to not be too risky. Say from riding motorcycles, which sounds cool and sexy and it's fun and to get my license updated, but same thing, you can be sort of like an old motorcyclist or an old pilot or a stupid one, but not both. Um, and so you really have to learn to manage risk sort of all around, right? Whether on a motorcycle or flying in the air or anything, or even skiing, I suppose. So I sure didn't have any great lessons. We had a lot of fun out sailing. Um,
No
we did a lot.
motorcycle breaking down while you were out in the wild, and
No, I've almost killed myself at least once. I had a time when I was in high school
okay.
with a motorcycle, and on a rough road, and the motorcycle had some harmonics in it, and so it would vibrate at a certain speed, which is fine, just avoid that speed, right? But you also can set up a harmonic where the road, a little bit of a rough road, is sort of making you shift like this. And I remember very clearly going, I don't know, 60, 70 miles an hour to like 100 kilometers an hour. And the handlebars are just going completely side to side. Yeah, I'm going straight, but the handlebars are going like this. And the motorcycle is like, moving all the place. And, I thought I might buy the farm right there. That's one of my scariest little adventures. And it never
And
happened again. I wrote that book for
what
years.
not
And,
to do?
well, and it had come on by itself. You're just kind of going whatever. And pretty soon you're like in this oscillation thing. How do you slow down? It never happened again on that motorcycle, which I still have. But that was weird. But unfortunately, it never happened in a
And
helicopter.
I'm glad you stayed safe. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the first thing you get in a helicopter, and they warn you, don't do these things. You'll kill yourself. When a helicopter does this, do that, but don't do this. And your instincts aren't always your friend because things move in ways that you don't expect. It's all these kind of motion, right? So it's skiing or motorcycles or boating or whatever. Everything's in motion. So it's
That's very interesting. I've never
some things.
seen parallels between riding a bike and helicopter flying. That's very interesting.
Yeah, and sailing, all that stuff. You're super sensitive to motion, I would say. There's a motorcycle, especially if someone in the back. If you're about a motorcycle with a passenger, it changes the dynamics. You got to be aware of what they're doing. Same thing if you're on a sailboat, you're always thinking about the wind of the sails, you feel for the boat, right? And because you can feel the wind to a shift. And obviously, the thing flying, there's that. It's all about feeling and sensing what's going on and hopefully intuitively doing the right thing or at least intellectually doing it. So
Cool.
no, other than that, not too many near death misses or anything like that. So,
That's awesome. Talking about intellectual stuff, you've written books and one on offshoring the middle class, which was published in 2006, but I mean, it's still relevant today. Um, and in the book, you talk about the effects of offshoring services jobs and the necessity for innovation and adaptation in today's globalized economy. I'm curious, given the advancements in tech since the publication, how do you see offshoring trends evolving, and particularly in the tech sector?
wrote that. I was thinking much more about I don't know white collar services because software is part of that, but which has always kind of been going on for a while. But
Mhm.
I also was thinking about accounting and legal work and writing any sort of white collar intellectual whatever office work the computer, and that is true. But it's interesting that it hasn't nearly developed as much as I thought it would. Even
Wow,
accounting, which is
that's interesting. You thought it
yeah,
would
I
be.
brought well across sectors. Now, software is different, and that has actually developed more. But I was thinking, so any job you do as a recruiter, you can offshore. But having done a much of that myself, it's more challenging than it looks. And even something like accounting, which is fairly, standardized and I would say basic, but it's very, very regimented. Even big companies have tried to offshore a lot of that stuff and it really struggled, and Deloitte's been really successful, but they sort of have 5 or 10,000 people in India and, super large scale and processes and training. They've gotten it to work, but very few others have. And if you're a small company, and you just want to offshore your accounting to, where they're India, I thought that would be pretty common. And that really isn't a thing. And I think that's very standardized, and other things that are more creative or interactive, even less of that. So even today with Zoom and stuff like this, we don't see that as much as I would have thought. Although you are seeing sort of writers and other copy editing and graphic services and a lot of that sort of very contractual, like, hey, I need this picture. Okay, here's your picture, sort of thing. But I would have expected more like whole scale sort of job movement. And I'm sort of writing about that and how to deal with that and so on. Software, different story. That you are seeing, I would say, a lot of software moving in part because it's just so expensive. In the US, especially sitting here in Silicon Valley, where the recent layoffs notwithstanding, people are very, very expensive and very talented, but also very expensive. So, what's that trade-off? We'll get less talent, but way less cost, or whatever. And you are seeing that, and people have various success stories and less than success stories and failures, and it's still pretty hard, right? Even with
So
tools and tech.
what are your lessons in terms of like, what factors do you consider while evaluating in offshore?
I think on the tech side, I'm becoming much more sensitive to time zone. Because and looking, these days, and you see more interest in Latin America, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, Peru. I had a call with Uruguay the other day. In part because as those, option or those countries and the education system and so on, both English and technology has sort of come up the scale, and just being in time zone, more or less in time zone, is so important. When you work offshore, because it's challenging, time zone wise, culture wise, a lot of stuff. And startups moving fast, it's one day to do something, then a day to get some feedback, then a day to get communication, then a day. It's almost impossible.
So is it time zone or overlap? Like,
well, yes, that's what I mean. I mean overlap, yeah.
okay.
Or some overlap.
I asked that because we work with a lot of companies, and so we provide like, I think 4 hours of overlap is generally good. If you're an early stage startup, there should be some work time for like working on stuff too. That's very interesting. And so you're saying overlap is the one key factor which you think
Well, I think
overrides.
that I mean that's a kind of a newer one, I would say.
Okay.
And in part because years ago, maybe 10 years ago, you really didn't have a lot of time zone options. So you're either in sort of, Southeast Asia or you're in Eastern Europe, neither of which, frankly, has much overlap. And so Latin America sort of has become more of an option, and fairly attractive. So we'll see how that plays out because skill levels vary and experience and so on. So that's one. Obviously, beyond that is the cost. Just you got to find good companies. You've got to have work with them. You've got to invest. And you still obviously small companies typically start with a provider. That's a company, your shop or development shop or whatever, and then are have their employees staffing sort of your project. That's sort of minimally committed, you might say, versus hiring your own staff, right? Or hire to own sort of thing or whatever. Where you've got more, 25 people in Argentina or 25 people in Bangalore. And then you really have to be, committed to investing in them, treat them like employees that are here, travel, go there, even though it's kind of a pain. Community events, community building, team building, all that stuff. It's just really important. So I think the ability to do that is a very important factor, at least over time as you get larger. When you're small and 1 or 2 people, this is really challenging. As it's just paying for all and so on. So it's still a challenge. I find just finding the right culture and company experience, working a project, references, super important.
So this resonates. Yeah, this resonates with me big time. So I feel like the clients where they consider the team as an internal team and not like, oh, these are the offshore guys, let's just throw this problem towards them. and just that common courtesy. And you'd be surprised like how much ownership um, just that sort of builds within teams, especially post COVID, just around the world anywhere. Um, I've actually had to talk my team like reduce the number of hours you're working. Does the client know it's pushing 60? Like, uh, this much of ownership may be unhealthy because it's fine to do it once in a while, but yeah, just going to your point, when you said that treat them like your own employees, huge dividends for startups if that courtesy is extended. Um, and talking about that, moving closer to China, so you actually have that rare covenant experience. You've worked and founded a company there, in fact. Um, any key differences that come to mind between the startup ecosystem there compared to the Bay Area?
Well, on one level, it's much closer to Bay Area, US, whatever tech culture than you would think.
Okay.
A lot of things in China, pretty close to US, surprisingly so, versus like say Japan or Korea or something. Um, and reality is a lot of them, especially when I first started in China, a lot of the senior people there, founders, investors, whatever, had been, educated in the US or been on the US or big companies. So obviously they're grafting that culture over there. Um, but still, there were challenges. I mean, the education system in lots of Asia, has its challenges. It's excellent at many things. Um, it's not so excellent sometimes at sort of what people call the innovation, think outside the box, challenge authority, you know, um, break the mold, kind of do, lots of new things, especially in sort of East Asia, so the Japan, Korea, China. These are challenges. And so the Chinese education system, that's where you sit there and listen to the teacher and don't ask a question and don't say anything and just write down and take tests, which sadly is still fairly prevalent, isn't ideal for sort of groundbreaking innovation, change the world startup things. Um, and I think, maybe India, other places have some similar thing. And also the culture of go work for big companies, something stable, new future, and not this crazy startup stuff is still a thing. Um, and in reality is too, it's just, especially when I got there, it was all fairly new. People were just coming into the workforce, young people, and just figuring out how to be in the office and how to interact with teams and how to, use a computer to some extent. Because 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you had people who hadn't had computers, maybe in college, maybe after college, where now, of course, they're just like Americans and all got iPhones, and, iPads and laptops, in middle school or whatever. But it wasn't that way a few years ago, but also in China. Things move very fast. Companies move very fast. Products move very fast, much, much faster than people are used to in the US. We like to think we move fast. Um, and so it's very much this, move fast and break things. A lot of stuff gets broken. Um, at the same time, there's not a lot of planning. Um, if you picture yourself maybe in a Japanese or German company where we're going to plan out, everything, how it's going to go and all the options and kind of, in China, it's just go this way, and this way, and that way. And things get dragged around. Project management and just overall management is a fairly new and relatively weak, you might say. Where I think the US tries to be in the middle, right? Trying to be fast and nimble and all that, but let's try to get organized and plan. And there's different outliers of those things. And China is really the Wild West still. Um, and there's much less management. It's very common to have like 50 people report to you, or have a founder and like 50 like employees, no managers, which you wouldn't see, I think, here. Um, so it's controlled chaos broadly in the whole place, really. And so if you're not used to that and used to sort of just stuff and having it very, very specific and drive and manage and all this, it's not the place for you probably in some sense.
That's very interesting. So are most of these founders, leaders, sort of like, people who returned from the US with some experience in education?
10, 15 years ago, that was the case, definitely.
Okay.
The returnee or called sea turtles that sort of come back from the ocean into the beach, type way. Uh, Today, that's less common, obviously, because it's more homegrown talent. And so you still have a fair amount of overseas experience and practical experience, but less than you used to. So I think that's changing somewhat. And some of the most successful companies have been completely homegrown. Also others foreign, interface and so on. So, but there's still a lot
That's
of foreign
very
influence.
interesting.
Huge. It's all American, so tools, technology, all of that. Although, some things are being developed there, of course. Um, a lot of open source and, very similar to Silicon Valley in really a lot of ways. It's very scrappy, very, very quick, very, and there's a lot of money. So the money sort of drives a lot of stuff.
Well, moving to your work as a fractional CTO, how do you approach building trust and rapport with the founders and internal teams at startups you work with? And especially considering that these are potentially shorter engagements compared to like the full-time CTO role. And I believe you've been doing this for what, 30 years?
Well, 27
Um,
years. Yeah, I mean, I've also been in and out of companies too, but yeah, I've
so
been doing it on
the
and off.
the fractional title maybe came off late. Perhaps it was like a consultant CTO or
I think we used to call it
what was
interim, in
internal
2000 or
CTO?
so, I might have called it interim CTO. That was kind of
Okay.
a common word. Fractional, yeah, I think in the last few years, 5 years. And that came out of, people doing a fractional CFO was pretty common, financial stuff, because that's fairly common company to company. You don't only need a CFO, but you need somebody. Um, and CTOs were more integral typically as a founder. But yeah, I'm doing it a lot. It's a challenge, right? Because you don't know people very well, and it really depends. That's why I like working at early stage companies, because sort of you're in there in the beginning, and you're hiring people, and you're kind of building stuff, and you're kind of getting going, and you set up everything. It's much harder to sort of pop in. Some people are very good at this, pop in later and sort of fix stuff and overhaul stuff, or there are a bunch of like fractional CTOs I know, but they're very senior people used to working in 5,000 person organizations or 2,000 people. This is not me. And they're dealing, of course, with some strategy, but also budgets and priorities and teams and divisions and interoperability and a lot of things that are important, but to me not that interesting. They're really more political, or budget or other things, but they're not day to day building technical thinking about stuff. In a way that I like. Those are important roles. They're just not my kind of role. For me, I think part of it is how do you build rapport? Some of it is showing up, trying to be confident and really building stuff, right? I mean, reality is usually there's a lot of problems. That's good. Somewhat. Solving problems, building product, getting things done, getting processes, just doing that fairly quickly. Usually, engage or talk to somebody that got a bunch of problems and a bunch of issues. And, the more you can talk about and understand their issues and because they're common challenges, and usually they're fairly easy to fix, early stuff. So you build rapport in that sense right away as sort of, having done it before, demonstrating real like competency and value in the first week, right, or the first day, talking to them. We should do this, and this, and do that, and that, and sort of moving that forward. So it really is just executing, I think, is the main thing. Obviously, listening. Another thing I find useful is, I've worked in a lot of industries and a lot of areas, so like it's pretty easy for me. But trying to understand and speak in their language or in their terminology. So if they're in healthcare, we talk about patients and experiences and medications, FDA. If we're in, parking lot management, we have to talk about cars and vacancies and whatever. But using the terminology and using the way, basically reflecting what they say, goes a long way with anybody, right? And of course, you learn as you do it over a number of years, you learn more and more about various areas, and hopefully you get somewhat smart about that. So I think I'm pretty good at that. People feel that I get what they're doing very quickly, and that's another way to kind of build rapport. Even though if you're from outside the XYZ industry, um, you're sort of feeling like you're connected very quickly. So listening very carefully, understanding what they're talking about, and then using that in the same way, and using the terminology right from day one or right from the first meeting, I find to be a very effective way to do that. And I think people struggle with that. Like, what is that again? How does that work? That's effective.
How often is it also about just helping relationships within the organization that you just joined, and just maybe the people have the solutions, maybe they just need that person who's really listening and sort of putting the connecting the dots, as opposed to the solutions coming from outside, or from you cross-pollinating those solutions from other industries.
Yeah. Well, it's both. It depends. I mean, early stage, typically there are messes and not too many solutions. And I think you're fixing stuff more. But it depends on the stage, but you're right. Um, Part of it is just listening. Like sometimes I work with larger companies or more established where there's also history and politics and, reading the room, which is really hard in Zoom, obviously, of the interpersonal kind of dynamics. I've had clients where there's clearly stuff going on and some people are more wacko than other people. Um, and that's a dynamic, and that depends, who your customer is. Is it the CEO, hopefully? Is it some other, CTO if it's a project, or is it the investors, and trying to manage that? But yeah, then it's really listening, and particularly listening to people that don't get listened to is very important. That's broadly across any company, right? Women, people of color, so on, younger people who sadly don't get listened to enough, and who very often are very smart. And if you listen to them, they kind of get, and encourage them a little bit and make sure they're speaking. You can get a lot of good ideas by listening to folks, right? And of course, they get encouraged. And I had many cases where, young women, for example, which make great engineers, but, frankly, the old guys don't listen to them. And if you just give them a platform and just sort of support them, within reason, of course, and they blossom like a flower, right? And there's lots of brilliance there. And you can, without, being favoritism and other stuff, you have to be careful of it. But you can elicit good things around the organization. Um, and there's, usually if you're coming from the outside, there's inevitable backlash sometimes. And, and again, how you got there and why and what you're trying to do. If you're fixing stuff or overhauling previous strange things, somebody probably owned that strange thing. And like, it's one thing.
Do you wait for some time before making any suggestions? Like, do you put a Socratic at it? Like,
try to read, you got to read it right. It varies. And depends how urgent the problems are. But, and it's one thing if someone says, yeah, we didn't know any better. We just kind of did it this way. Well, that's cool. That's the throw with that. Let's try to make it better. As opposed to, this is the right way and it's a great way and it's clearly stupid or mismatched or whatever. And is that one person or is it a whole team? If the 10 people are saying this is the right way to do it, now what do you do, right? And that's a management challenge anyway, right? But I haven't had too much of that, I guess. But again, it's just the people part is so important, and that's why Zoom kind of sucks because it's just really hard to read all that. I've had projects because I've never met anybody, and it's a challenge. One-on-one you can do pretty well, but people dynamic, especially if they don't meet each other much either. I really am not a big fan of remote work for this reason. You get 9 little Zoom windows. You're trying to figure out who's like shooting the arrows at each other, and you can't do that.
Yeah, I guess initial meetings are, you need those in-person meetings before. Yeah.
And ideally together, but you can't always do that or afford that, or people have gone remote, so they're scattered, right? So those are the hard parts, but yeah, it's obviously about the people and relationships and listening and trying to understand you if you don't agree, like, this is, I understand you're saying this, and this, here are the challenges of that. This is kind of what we had to do, at least you're listening and understanding versus like, oh yeah, whatever, and then obviously that's fatal. So it's important, any kind of management, like even if they don't agree with you or you don't agree with them, that you at least you listen to them, amplify their issues, try to build consensus, obviously amongst other people, and yeah.
Yeah, I saw this C-level officer's title, job description as my job is half therapy and half just, helping people decide what they're going to solve. And I think it's huge, just people, the need to be heard, and a lot of times they do have the solutions. It's interesting. Moving on, connecting, like, you have experience as an advisor and an investor. What are some of the misconceptions that you've encountered about the role of a fractional CTO, and how can a community of fractional CTOs perhaps better educate potential clients about the value they provide?
Yeah, I mean, that's a topic of discussion, certainly in the various fractional groups. It's up a lot in coffees. And I think progress is being made. At the same time, the industry or the supply base is being flooded with people that are sort of losing their jobs, and everybody's now a fractional CTO, even if they've never been CTO or fractional. And it all sounds the same, and that's not really very helpful. So I'm not sure there's misconceptions beyond we don't need one, right? Or why would I do that? Or how would that help? Or when do you need it? Because again, I deal most of the early stage. I can, walk down the street to one of the incubators, here in Palo Alto or someplace, talk to everybody, and they'll just tell you all their problems, right? And all these issues. And I have this, and how do I go offshore? And what about the quality and the security and the people that I can't hire, I can't find. But oh, do you want a fractional CTO? No, we'll just suffer, or so it's actually, for many folks, because they're so busy, and a lot of them are young or inexperienced, founders, then these services exist to help you, right? Uh, and so I think it's partially an awareness, and then, well, how does that work? It's going to be super expensive. Um, I have a developer, or I have a CTO, but a bad one, or I have a founder. Often you have to around founder CTOs that were engineers somewhere else, typically, maybe a big company. And that is rarely a good match, I think. If you come out of Google as a mid-level engineer and now you're a CTO of a startup, um, that doesn't work super well in my experience. It can, certainly. And you certainly can get it going because you kind of, depends where you worked before too. If you came out of school into Google and then out of Google, that's not so good. But if you work a few places, then you at least know, hey, we got to have some stuff. Let's get GitHub, let's get a cloud, let's get this, let's work on technology, let's build some stuff. But then you start hiring people and manage them and do lots of stuff, that becomes a major challenge. And prioritizing, a lot of people are good developers. Your software is a little bit different because I'm an electrical engineer originally, and I used to build factories and manufacturing. And so engineering is what we did all day, every day. And you're forever trading off things and cost and time and all that. Software is relatively easy to develop to start off, right? You could be a good developer, but not a good engineer. It's hard to be a good bridge engineer or bridge maker without being an engineer, or a good airplane engineer or something. Software, you can do a lot of software without being a good engineer, meaning, and I should write more about this, meaning that, you sort of aren't used to prioritizing or trading off or thinking about priorities or sequencing and all the things. I can just write, I can finish this ticket, right? Or I can get this feature out. But, naming things is always a challenge, right? I'm always very interested in watching people think about names of like variables and stuff. Because it really shows like, what are they thinking about, from just, oh, whatever, to thinking about, 3 years of documentation and APIs and whatever. So, anyway, so it's kind of hard to find good engineers. It's easy to find good developers. And the CTO is sort of, to my mind, is a super version of that, right? To really don't write my software, maybe any, but to really think about decisions and thinking out, what are we doing today, this week, this month, this year, and how do all those things connect on a whole bunch of tracks of money, people, process, infrastructure, scale, security, none of which have to do with features, by the way. Plus, features and, demos and sales people and
Plus the people,
product management. Like,
yeah,
people
part.
in there. And so
So
all
I
those
think
things are in
this
there
is
that aren't actually just features, right? And the CTO needs to think about all that stuff. And that's
there
not
we
so
go.
easy, right? Especially early on, early stage.
I feel that's
people.
yeah, that's a big part of the misconception, right? So if you're bringing in a frac CTO, you're bringing them in because they have been there, and with experience, they've seen a lot of mistakes being made, and so it's sort of like the road, and you know that, hey, here are the areas where you can fall, so they can guide you for that. And perhaps you don't need a lot of time for the fractional CTO. To your point when you said, hey, how expensive is this going to be? What I hear from people is, hey, I feel like your fractional cost is going to be X. I'd rather, so instead what I'll do is I'll get a junior person or someone who's an engineer, individual contributor somewhere else. And because they're, they're more economical, and I'll just give them 3 months or something, and I'll probably end up paying them 10 times more. And more like, so how you go to a doctor, you go for very specific advice, and because of the experience they have. So I feel like that's the role the frac CTO play. It's sort of advisory. It's sort of like, okay, let me look at the 10,000-foot perspective and put things in place. But in some of my conversations, people have expected them to sort of be the people who will fix the website also. And no, you hire a developer for that, or I don't know, partner with someone for that, right?
Yeah, and it's really, and I think different people are different. Not everybody's good at everything, right? And so, as I said, some people can do very big companies and very different things. Some people, as you said, can do those things and do all the priorities. Hopefully, they don't have to code. Although, what I like to do, I feel very technical and get my hands dirty a lot. And I'm trying
You
to
do?
code, but I do like to code. Yeah. But I do like, and I set up infrastructure and do stuff. And partially sometimes to get it done because it's going to get done, right? And I don't have got to do it. Well, let's do it for a couple hours or get something working. But I like to get stuff working in part, especially even coding. I'm not a great coder. I'm a great code structure, let's say, or I'm going to show you how I want to do it, or how I want it done, whether that's architecture or just how to document something or how to name things. This is, how I, like to do it. And then let's maybe bad. If it's bad, tell me, fine, that's great. But especially working with junior people, this is what it should look like, kind of. And it doesn't even matter the code as much as the structure and thinking about that. Again, how do you be an engineer, right? As a demonstration or an MVP or to get something just working because something needs to work, and then hand it off. And so you're sort of prototyping almost in some sense. Or doing code reviews. That's what a code review is. To some extent, right? You're not writing the code yourself, but you're going through, this is how I would think about this. And this is how, we might improve this or at least discuss, because maybe I can learn something too. Because how do I get good at coding? I listen to other people. Have you thought about doing it this way? And why maybe we don't want to do that? What's going to happen tomorrow? What's going to happen when we modify this? What are the security implications of this? How's the next guy going to manage this? We're going to push this offshore to some guy who doesn't have any idea what you did or why. And that for a year, right, or whatever. And so, just talking through all that stuff, the actual code isn't the key part. And I feel that they don't get in the code or don't review it or don't look at it or don't ever ask questions, are missing a piece. And also just even asking questions. Like, why do we do it like this? Or how's that work? And maybe learn something like, oh, hey, I didn't even know you could do that. Cool. Or, well, we didn't think about that. Well, now we got to prioritize. Do we go back and fix it? Do we think about it? Do we put it on the list for next month, next year? How do you move all this around? But ideally, you're elevating the organization and yourself, continuously, because you're all getting connected to each other. And not blaming people, this is stupid or what thought of it, none of that, right? You're trying to all learn from each other. I think that's important at the fairly technical level. And then obviously you have higher levels of saying it. So,
Steve, just that, you just simply said it, it's not about, shouldn't be blaming people that it acts culture, but I think that takes years to learn. I think I've seen very few people who have that at a younger age. That sort of mindset. I think you learned that. And my follow-up question on this is, how does fracs, or how should a frac CTO, or how do you perhaps measure the impact of your work on the companies you engage with? Do you have any specific metrics or frameworks to sort of track the progress and demonstrate value? And I guess now what I'm thinking is perhaps I'll write a little article or something about why startups should get that senior frac CTO, even if that frac CTO is sort of like an advisor to whoever their CTO is. But there's a ton of value here. And so, tying that to, how do you measure the impact of that senior fractional experience CTO?
I'm a fan of advising CTOs and so on. I've done a bunch of that. And there's different types of advisors to that role, but because exactly, we all learn from everybody, right? For metrics, it's really hard. I think I do pretty early stage. So you're talking MVP and things like this versus developer velocity metrics that I don't care about at all, or individual developer productivity, how many hours and lines of code. This is all useless. Useless in general, and especially useless in a startup. But for me, if it's just my own that I succeed for you or your customers, it's really about, to me, I think first solving the problems. It's usually there are problems there. We talked before, everybody should have a fractional CTO, but usually you get there when there's a lot of problems. You can't deliver the product. It's not secure. It's crashing. I can't do it. Outsource, whatever. Realistically, success in the first month or two is solving those problems, right? And so to make the pain go away, that's a pretty good success story, and usually pretty easy to measure. Like, did we have these 5 things you said we're going to work on? Did we do them? I think that's pretty straightforward. Other than that, it really depends where they are starting from, right? If trying to scale up X or trying to work on security or whatever. I think usually in the fractional, especially in the early fractional days, because they're first 3 months or whatever, you just usually block and tackling all these things, and whether or not you're successful at that is fairly obvious. If that extends out, a year or two, now you have a larger organization, usually if you're fundraising or whatever, and there's more things, and then there's more just traditional things like, are you delivering features? Are we keeping costs under control? Are we secure? Stuff like that.
Okay.
That's really, I don't have a particular framework or checkboxes. I think it's really blocky. To me, it's just getting in there, blocking, tackling, nuts and bolts, move things forward, and and solving more problems than you're causing, hopefully by a lot.
But perhaps there's something
and I
around,
think people feel that.
yeah.
So,
So I think perhaps there is something around, how you said you mentored a lot of CTOs. Uh, Perhaps there's something around what they have to say, right, in terms of what they have learned. Um,
sure, sure.
the advice from senior folks who've been there, done that is extremely powerful. And one of the lessons I should have learned like 15 years back. Uh, but you just learn it the hard way. Steve, what are your thoughts on how frac CTOs should price their time and effort? So I've seen everything from hourly to I work with, X number of companies at a time. And
Big topic of discussion, all over the place. I mean, in the end of the day, you're sort of either doing something semi-hourly, time based, right? Like a project type thing. I'm going to do so many hours, so many weeks, or so many whatever, or sort of retainerish, which everybody prefers. And so I try to think about, uh, days per week per month. So, minimum ideally is like I can help you a day a week, and then ideally that's so much per month. Now obviously that's plus or minus a few days, a few hours, you do more or less, but then that's the way to think about it, I think. And then if you do want, okay, do 2 days a month, 2 days a week, and then that's so much per month and so on. And obviously you can't do, 4 clients in 4 days a week. And so there's usually some
why
balance
not?
there. Well, you can't, I mean, if you're doing 4 days, well, I mean, no, it's 4 days a week. You're spending 4 days a week or, 30 hours a week with each client. It's kind of a challenge if you want to sleep, um, in that sense. And again, this is pretty fungible time, realistically. But I think a lot of fractional, especially in the recent market with like all these funded people coming, would like more work. And so obviously you work weekends and nights, and things, but it's hard to juggle more than a few too, because you're just going to keep all this straight in your head, right? Who all the people are, who all the technology is, all the projects, and if you're in different sectors or whatever, doing more than 3 fairly hardcore would seem to be pretty challenging. Um, Obviously, you can advise, here or there, a few hours a month, whatever, chatting with folks. You can do a lot of that. Something like an advisory board member type thing. But if you're in there and you're managing meetings and you're, triaging tickets and you're reviewing code, it's hard to do that for 5 different clients in any confident way, I would think.
Okay.
But I think we're all still novel to that. And so I usually have 2 or 3 at most. What I would call primary engagement. Like I'm really not part of your team, right? I'm managing your people, different things. We're talking, every day, every other day. We're doing these calls all the time. It's just really challenging to juggle that more than a small number. So I think that's, so the challenge is how to put that together, how to make enough money to pay the rent, how to, add value and not be too expensive. We all should be charging more probably, in terms of value add, realistically, because you are making a big impact, I think, obviously if you're successful, enabling these companies to be successful. And again, you take equity or not, that's a lot of people have different opinions on that. I see a trend towards not doing it, less equity. A lot of people, I'm not that interested in equity. I've taken a lot of equity over the years. Some worked out, probably most hasn't, so I don't know. Or a lot of it hasn't, but that's a kind of an also a related thing. But
On equity, I do wonder why it's not a norm. If you're coming in as a frac CTO to get a company from point A to point B, say a C to Series A or Series A to B, why not just tie some sort of bonus to getting to that point? Because you're not there in the long run, and uh, yeah.
yeah, I think that's true. And I've always been a fan. I mean, the challenge is companies that only have equity and have no cash, and then don't make it no matter what you do. So obviously a lot of other factors. Yeah, that's really challenging. Um, and then, okay, if you do 50-50, I think there's a move to doing sort of relatively market or, reasonable rates, especially given the cost of things, especially in California and places, right? Um, but then also exactly have something to own it. And so I'm always happy to talk about equity. Uh, and okay, do you do this much equity? Can we cut your rates by 10 or 20%? Well, yeah, sure, maybe. Can we cut your rates by 80%? No, probably not. And so that's that dynamic. And that's, partially also, I used to work with a lot of really early stage folks, or try to. And that's a challenge because one, they have no money to pay you. They also have no money to do anything. So they have like one part-time developer. It's hard to do a lot with that, even if we're outsourcing. Um, so the challenge for, I think, if you're like me, is you want to catch them when they're just big enough that they have money and some resources and are kind of doing stuff, building MVP, talking to customers, but not Series B where they've got 300 people and I want to have a CTO realistically and stuff. You want to catch them this magic, seed-ish, pre-seed, seed-ish stage. So, and as we talked, that requires a lot of nuts and bolts, getting in there and small companies. And particularly, so I work with accelerators, like if I were to startups, Skydeck and folks like that are pre-vetting companies for you also realistically and can tell you who needs help and what, and that help, and they have some money. And that's good. So you do that and some equity and, Y Combinator, then you feel a lot more comfortable about their prospects, no matter what you do, realistically. Especially if you're bouncing around different industries, you don't know, is this company really the hot one in this industry? A little hard to tell. If that's not your historical industry. So
Interesting. And you've already, I think, connected with my next question, which was, given your role at Bay Angels, please share your thoughts on if investors see startups with frac CTOs as a positive. Are they happy funding a startup with a frac CTO? So that's one thing where, hey, yeah, these guys are incubated at our place, and please come on as a frac CTO and help them get from here to the next stage. Or do they, insist that no, you come on full board and take equity, and that's when they'll fund them?
yeah, I don't know. I think it depends on the stage, right? So definitely if you're at Series A and really later, you need to have full-time people, depending on your industry and where you are, right? And it's different if you're doing semiconductors or aircraft or whatever. You need to have senior people, right? People who want to really know their stuff. If you're writing an app or managing dogs and cats, that's a well-known thing. Technology is not really the thing there, so you can go much longer without a bunch of hardcore tech people, depending on what you're doing. And there's some spectrum there. So that plays into it in early stage. I think more they're not super familiar with it, and part of the question is, for me at least as an investor, is if they already have a CTO, who are they? And again, we talked before, are they some of a big company? Are they some junior engineering guy you just happen to know and was your friend? A bad CTO is worse than none at all, in some ways. And so I think you're seeing more fractional and parts of that led again by CFOs that investors are very familiar with, where a little bit later stage, CFOs, CMOs, all that tends to be very part-time, fractional in an early stage company because you just can't afford it otherwise. So I think this is opening up more and more, and you see a lot more of it. I haven't been through too many recent funding cycles coming back to the US, so I'm not sure how folks are viewing it yet. Can you get good Series A funding, raise $20 million without a CTO? That's still probably pretty hard in a lot of industries. But at the same time, it depends how you sell it, right? As a fractional CTO, you're helping us, and our plan is to get a CTO. We're going to need you, the investors, to help to do that. I got these candidates lined up. We just need the money. That's an okay story. To say, oh, we're just going to be fractional and sit here and do nothing. We're going to raise $10 million and have no idea, no plan. Well, that's not the thing either, right? You might say that fractional's got to come on board with us. Cool, because we love him. He's been with us 2 years, and I have some clients like this. Or we have a plan, right? I just want to see a plan more than other things. And what have you demonstrated? Your product good? People love it. It's going well. That's pretty good. That's why we're investing. If the fractional guy sucked, that wouldn't be happening, right? If your product sucks and crashes all the time and it's terrible, and you got a fractional guy there, maybe that hasn't gone so well. So I think I'm not sure the team is certainly critically important, obviously, as you invest. I think maybe the jury's still out a little bit, but it's what's the alternative? Having nobody, having a bad CTO, those are worse for sure. And then I think with the fractional is if it's a plan, okay, we're going to raise money, we're hiring extra people, we got these two guys, or women that we've identified, looks better and looks like you. But in the meantime, we have fractional, we got all our process in place, we have our security in place, we have all this stuff we've done. This looks pretty good. We sort of shepherd all resources.
Fractional with a plan for what happens once you get funded.
And demonstrating it worked, right? Hey, we didn't have a lot of money. We had a fractional person a couple of days a week. We paid them, a lot less than we paid a full-time person. and we got all this stuff out of it, and we're going forward, and we have a plan. So we manage our resources well. We got a good person. We did a good job, and we have a plan. Okay, that's maybe not as good as having a rock star from the beginning, but that's as close you can get, right?
That's very good insight.
Yeah, and same thing in marketing, other things, right? Hey, we did what we could, some MVP, CD, whatever, and I think you can sell that reasonably in certain industries, right? Now, if you're doing physics breakthroughs, laser, something that's different, right? In the software world, I think that's fine.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Steve. This was really fun. I thought I had fewer questions and we'd be done in 30 minutes, but I think we could have gone on. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.